All right, so now we want to be able to mark our messages as read. We have the button here, and there's basically two parts to this. We want to be able to add the handler to click and then send the request to update the message to read. And then we also need to create the API route to do that. And as we've been kind of doing along in this course, I'd like to create the route first. So let's go to our app API folder, and then in messages, we're going to need to create a new folder called brackets ID because we need to update a specific message. And make sure that you're in the API messages folder, not just the app messages folder. And then inside that ID folder, we'll create our route.js file. And then from here, we're going to import a few things. Let's bring in ConnectDB. Let's bring in the message model. And let's bring in the get session user that we created from the no, not that. We want get session user from the utils file. Okay, and then I'm also going to add this this export const dynamic, or else we're going to have issues if we try to deploy to Vercel. What am I doing? Dynamic, and we're going to set that to force dash dynamic. All right, so now we want to create our function here, which is it's going to handle a put request. So let's say put /API/messages and then whatever the ID is. And it's a put request because it is an update. Even though we're just updating a single field, it's still updating something that's there. And in the messages, you should have this read value, and by default, it's set to false. All right, so let's say export const put and set that to async. Okay, and then what we're going to do in here first is what we usually do, which is add a try catch with the database connect. And then we need to get the ID, so let's actually pass in here, in addition to request, we're going to pass in an object, and we want to get the params because that allows us to get the ID. So now we can destructure the ID from params. And again, it's ID is available because of the name of this folder. If we called this like message ID, then we would put message ID here. Now for the user ID from the session, I'm just going to copy that from the messages route.js. So just these lines here, we'll grab those, put that right under the ID. Then we need to find the message by the ID. So under where we get the user, let's say const message, and let's set that to await, and then use the message model, and then find by ID. And then we can just simply pass in the ID. That should get us the message. Then we're going to check to make sure that the message is there. So let's say if not message, then let's return new response, and we'll say message not found, and we're going to send a status of 404. And up here where we send back this, we don't really need to do JSON stringify, so we'll get rid of that, and then this parenthesis, we'll just send that string because we're not doing anything with the message. And then let's see, underneath checking the messages, we want to verify ownership. So this is really important because if we don't add this, then anybody's going to be able to set anyone's messages to read if they have the ID. So let's check and say if the message dot recipient dot toString, so if that is not equal to the user ID that's logged in, that's in the session, then we're going to return, I'll just grab this. Then we're going to return a response, and let's say unauthorized. And then status, we'll set that to 401. Okay, and then we want to then update the message to either read or unread depending on the current status, right? So if it's already marked as read, then we want to make it unread. And we'll reflect that in the UI by having a different button that says mark as unread or mark as new or something. So here we're going to say message dot read and set that to the opposite of whatever it is. So the opposite of message dot read. And then we want to save the message. So await message dot save. Okay, and then finally we'll return a new response, but let's make this a 200. And we're going to return JSON.stringify, and we want to send the message. Okay, and then in the catch here, we'll do a console log of the error, and then we'll send a 500. And we'll just say something generic. We'll just say something went wrong. Okay, so that should allow us to update if it's the right user. So now what we want to do is go back into the message component. Whoops. I want to go back to components and then message. And let's see, we're going to bring in at the top here, first of all, let's make it use client. And let's import the use state and use effect. And let's also import toast. Okay, now as far as the state, we're going to have is read. So const is read and then set is read. Use state, which is going to be in here, we can actually pass in message, which comes in as a prop, and then dot read. So that will set if it's read or not. And then down in the return, let's see, where we have the, actually, where do we want to put this? Let's put it right after the first div tag. So right after this div, I just want it, if it's read, or I'm sorry, if it's not read, I want to just have a new badge, just have it say new. So let's say not, actually we need to open up some curly braces, and we'll say not is read. So if it's not read, then let's go ahead and put a div in here. And I'm going to add a few class names to it because we want to position this absolute, because I want it to be like over here at the top right. So for classes here, let's say absolute. Let's do top -2, right -2. We'll give it a BG yellow. Let's say yellow 500 for the background. Text will be white. And let's do padding. So PX we'll do 2, and then PY 1, and then rounded medium. Okay, then we'll put our closing div, and then inside that we're just going to put the word new. So right now it shouldn't show it because none of them are new. I'm sorry, they are new because red is set to false, which means they're new, so it's going to show them. But we want to be able to mark it as red, and then that will go away. So to mark it as red, we need to send that request. So let's first add a handler to the mark as red button here. Let's say on click, and then we'll set that to handle, let's call it handle red click. Okay, and we're going to want to change, let's see, we're going to want to change the text and the color if it's red. So what we'll do is, for the class name, let's go ahead and replace this with brackets and backticks right there and right here. So backtick bracket. And let's see, where we have the background color, which is this right here, this BG blue. Let's right before that, I'm gonna say if is red, wait, yeah, we'll do if is red, then let's do BG dash blue dash 500. Yeah, else then we'll do, actually if it's red, let's do BG gray. We'll do BG gray 300. Else, then we'll do the BG blue dash 500. And I'm going to get rid of this second BG blue right here. I think that's, yeah, that should do it. But, oh, the text white, I only want that if it's blue, if the background's blue. So we're also going to put that in here like that. And then here we want to do the same thing. I'll just delete that, and we want to check is red. And if it is, then we're going to say mark as new. Else, then mark as red. All right, let's try that. Handle red click. Okay, so I just didn't define that function yet. So up here, let's say const handle red click, and we're going to want that to be async. So it says mark as red because it is new. Now if I were to set the state to true, that it is red, then that new goes away and it says mark as new. Okay, but I want message.red passed in there because that's coming from the prop. That's coming from the message. Now we just need to add the actual handle read click to make the request to the API route that we just created. So let's do that in here. So we'll go const res, set that to await fetch. And in here we're going to use backticks because we're going to add the ID in this route. So it's going to be API messages slash and then the message dot underscore ID. And then we also want to make sure that this is a put request. So method is going to be put. And we don't have to send any data because it's just setting red to either true or false based on what it already is. Then we're going to check the res.status, is that equal to 100? I'm sorry, 200. And if it is, then we want to get the data. So the data we're sending back, which is, let's see, right here. So we're sending back the message. Now all we need is the red value, so we can actually destructure from the message red. So set that to await res.json. And then we're going to just set is red to whatever that is, right? So set is red to red. And then let's do a toast. Actually, what do we want to do for the message? Because it really depends on what, if it's red or not. Yeah, I guess we'll just do it here. We'll say if red, then toast.success, and we'll say marked as red. Else, then we'll do toast.success and say marked as new. And then I think that should do it. And we'll just do console log here, and we'll say, we'll just console log the error, and we'll do a toast.error and just say something went wrong. All right, so let's try that out. We're going to come over here. I'm going to click mark as red. There we go, marked as red. Now the button changes and the new goes away. If I click it again, And let's just reload to make sure it sticks. Okay, if I click it again, the new comes back and marked as new. So we're now able to mark these as new or mark these as red. Cool, so in the next video I want to handle the delete because I do want to be able to also just completely delete the messages, so we'll do that next.